All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this brief little webinar conversation about getting out of the drama triangle. My name is Brooking Gatewood.
And my name is Praveen Mantena.
And we are looking forward to spending about 20 minutes with you all sharing about the drama triangle and how to get out of it. So we're going to share our screen right now. And a little bit about us. So I am a leadership coach and a strategic collaboration consultant, and I work with social benefit organizations, a lot of nonprofits, foundations, social mission businesses.
Great. And I'm an executive coach and also work in organizational culture as a consultant. So I tend to work with business leaders, either C-suite or senior leadership level, often on the principles of conscious capitalism. So higher purpose, increasing your leadership capacity, as well as really looking at all aspects of the impact your business is having in your local neighborhoods, in the environment, and in the planet in the end.
Yeah, and both Praveen and I, in our work with leaders, teams, organizations, and groups, have found that the framework we're going to share about today, the drama triangle, can really be a make or break shift in orientation to help groups navigate some of the common dramas, pitfalls, and challenges they struggle with. So we're going to give you guys a relatively brief but hopefully thorough and useful overview today. So you'll learn about what the drama triangle is, how to know when you're caught in it, and how to get out of it. And before we begin, I just want to offer a simple quote from a Mary Oliver poem for reflection. And this is from a poem called A Summer Day. And you may have heard this quote before. And the question is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And we just want to invite you all just to take a minute, maybe even pause the recording and write down your thoughts in response to that. And we're going to come back to it later. But we find that how people answer this question gives an interesting taste of how you tend to orient in your life and where, if at all, you're sitting in the drama triangle yourself. All right. So Praveen, you want to kick us off with a quick overview of what the triangle is?
Yeah, welcome to the dreaded drama triangle. Drama triangle goes back to the work of Cartman in the 60s. And more recently, I think it also popularized a great deal through the work of David Emerald and others as a framework. And it's one of those things that over time has become more and more significant. It's the thing that keeps giving. So both Brooking and I have worked with this model for many years, and I personally found for myself, the more I get into it, the more the subtleties and nuances of it reveal itself. So I want to just invite that perspective. Effectively, as you see, it's a triangle, and there's three roles or characters, should we say, in this. And if you look at these three roles, it's like the essence of like every soap opera, and to a large degree, almost every movie you see out there, including all the Hollywood movies, have these sorts of qualities in them. So they're really deeply ingrained in our culture and how we tend to operate and how even our stories and narratives go. So the first thing I want to say about the drama triangle is there's nothing wrong with the drama triangle. There's nothing wrong with these roles. We just want to give a different perspective of what's possible so you don't get stuck in these roles as we go into them. Yeah, Brooking, take it from there.
All right. Well, the first role is really the crux. You'll see it at the bottom of the triangle here, and that's the victim role. Some people talk about the whole drama triangle as the victim orientation. So basically, you see from the image, it covers it pretty well. The victim feels powerless. They feel like they have some dream in life, often that they aren't able to meet because of external circumstances, whether that's a person, a group of people, the system, the man, a circumstance, something outside of their own control, and often feel denied and powerless is sort of the fundamental crux of it. And for there to be a victim, there also has to be a persecutor, somebody or something that has the victim feeling powerless. And then often, as in the old movies, you'll have the rescuer role of somebody who sees somebody as a victim and comes in to try to save the day and gets to feel good about themselves in the process and being in the rescuer role. And the rescuer role is often, it's more of a quick fix, like a Band-Aid solution, rather than, the old parable from the Bible, give a man a fish versus teaching a man to fish. The rescuer is giving a man a fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so all of these roles also depend on the other parts of the triangle to work. There's three corners, and it's only a triangle if all three corners are connected. And we'll start with the rescuer, because that's where you left it off, Brooking. And the rescuer is actually probably the most insidious in some ways. Everyone's familiar with the persecutor. It's easy. You're the one who's blaming, is criticizing, you're putting people down. The rescuer in some ways is more subtle. The way it will show up in the workplace would be the one who's always coming in. What can I help with? Great. What can I do here? And they're coming in and trying to fix everything. And often a person who plays that role, because they need someone who's actually more victimized or more paralyzed or needs help, or who feels more powerless, over time, the rescuer can start to build up resentment. They can start to build up frustration. They can start to feel exhausted. They can start to get burned out. And then they can quickly move into becoming victims themselves, or they can move into becoming persecutors. And now what was first offered generously starts to now turn into criticism and blame. And you find that a lot even in relationships between people, be it in business partners or couples. Often if one person is playing the rescuer, they'll start to move towards victim and persecutor at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to turn off the screen share at this point so we can have a little bit more of a conversation with you all about these roles. Something else to say about the persecutor role is that often a persecutor is often the one pointing a finger. And another important part of the dynamic is that the persecutor is usually a former victim. So part of the emotional landscape of the drama triangle is the victim role feels an anxiousness and a powerlessness. And anybody who's felt that recognizes it's uncomfortable. I think we've all had that feeling in our life at some point. So some people tend to respond to that discomfort by saying to themselves, essentially, I never want to feel that again. And so there's a sort of defensive orientation to the persecutor role of defending the self from having to feel the vulnerability of being in the victim role ever again. So it's part of the intimate interrelationship. And the reality is often for one person's persecutor is feeling like a victim from somebody else in the triangle as well. So the roles move around very quickly sometimes, and especially in like romantic relationships or very close working relationships, the victim persecutor can sort of feel like a locked in loop where one victim is seeing somebody else as a persecutor and the other person is seeing that same person who sees themselves as a victim as the persecutor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to share something about the victim role too. So we're all familiar with this, some circumstances in life that are terrible, unavoidable, maybe even, and certainly not our fault, happened to us. So it's not like anyone who goes, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to me, and is in a victim role. Like, it's not like it's their fault and doing something wrong. The invitation here is to just really look at what the choice is in this. What makes the victim role really a stuck role often is the person continues to believe they're powerless even after the thing that led to them becoming the victim has left. So in that example, we showed a woman out in the train tracks and tied. It makes sense. She's powerless. She's tied up and train's about to come. But the truth is, even in that moment, she has a choice. There's things she can probably do. And more importantly, if that wasn't that extreme a situation, if whatever happened that caused all of that victimhood is gone, and now circumstances are starting to change, people in the victim role often tend to operate as if they're still completely powerless, and it's not true. We've seen this over and over again with our coaching clients. As we start to have conversations, we find all kinds of areas in which they're actually really empowered if they're willing to step in and start to look at that.
Yeah. It's almost like the victim orientation becomes sort of a familiar map. This whole drama triangle becomes a map of the world. And though it may have seemed very true at one point, the distinction is recognizing that forgiveness is a powerful tool in shifting out of the drama triangle. We'll get to that just a little bit later. But for this victim orientation, familiarity is comfortable to us, even if there's pain in it. So the tendency to want to stay in the familiar storyline can keep us stuck in the sense of powerlessness, even when we actually have a lot of other options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more point about the persecutor. So often people will find out about the drama triangle, and they'll go around and point out to others that they're being victims, or they're being this, or they're being that, which, believe it or not, actually puts you quickly in the persecutor role in the drama triangle. So like seeing the drama triangle, this is a practice in self-awareness. This is not a map to then take and walk around and point other people to and slap them with it. It doesn't actually work well that way at all. People get defensive, they get combative, and before you know it, you're reliving the triangle. Ironically, it happens pretty often with beginners with this map. So the invitation is for all of us to just look within ourselves as we study this map and see what we're playing and how we can step out of it. and then others who also are familiar with it and have done similar work, then we can support each other in getting out of the triangle.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about how to get out of the triangle. And to do that, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen for just a few slides here. And so something Praveen was speaking to earlier, there are people who in the world, of course, who have suffered great injustice. And Praveen, do you want to share a little bit about who Viktor Frankl is and the story behind this quote?
Sure. Yeah. Let me read the quote first, and I'll share a little background on it. So it's a famous quote. You might have seen this. It's used a lot. It's like one of the most famous quotes in the personal development and transformation industry, which is between stimulus and response. Stimulus being the external force of whatever has happened or is happening from life or someone else, and response, how one responds to the situation coming from within. There is a space, and in that space, and that space can be a pause. It can be a moment of self-reflection. It can even be a microsecond, is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, a classic in the personal development field, essentially outlines his experiences being a concentration camp victim, literally, victim in this case, and powerless during Nazi-occupied Germany. And what he noticed was people have all kinds of responses. Some people died, some people made it out, some people got it worse than others. But the biggest difference he found was how, not so much what happened, which is pretty much everyone was literally in the same boat here, suffering as victims, but how one chose to respond to it, particularly in terms of their dignity, how they went about life, what they gave up, what they didn't. Like no matter what the Nazis did, that choice was the place in which people basically either gave up their power or stayed in their power. And it was not about fighting back. It was not about resisting or denying. It was really about an internal orientation. And that's what we're going to speak about here in the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, this the space between stimulus and response, if anybody here has ever done meditation practice, this is something you'll get into in that practice as well, really learning to notice the tendency to react before you choose reaction. And in that space, there's literally a choice, and that space is breath. And so I want to name that some of the slides we're going to show here, and the Drama Triangle slide that we use is from a website called thepowerofted.com. And David Emerald is the author of the book on this TED, the empowerment dynamic, and how to shift out of the drama triangle. So I want to acknowledge his work and supporting making this drama triangle really clear. And this AIR acronym is also from his book. And the shift from victim orientation to creator orientation, the fundamental piece is this the sort of stimulus and response moment, and the ability to choose where we put our attention, and focusing instead of problem on vision and outcome, where we put our intention and focus on what we want to be creating in the world, and then taking action toward results. That's the R for results. And we want to take baby steps that are totally within our power to shift from feeling like there's a problem to, oh, what can I do in this situation to move towards more of what I want to create in the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can we go back there for a moment, Brooking? I just want to say something real quick about that slide. Yeah. So this stuff is so powerful because it's the kind of thing people look at and go, well, duh, yeah, I know that. It's like so obvious. And what's amazing is most people don't do it. They're certainly often when in a drama triangle don't do all three of them, and often they don't even just do one of them. They focus their attention in the wrong places. They continue to cycle back on what happened rather than looking forward, and they don't even seem able to actually take the first initial baby steps because there's all these reasons why it's not possible or it won't work. They worked it out in their head. So it's the simplest possible thing you can do here, and just watch and look around you, even when you work with people or you work with yourself in life, how little or how much of that they're taking these very, very simple steps. So the beauty is in execution here.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, there's another triangle that is possible in this the empowerment dynamic, this TED approach, and the victim becomes a creator. And again, the main distinction there is a shift from a problem focus and from complaining to a vision focus and taking action, feeling empowered to create what you want to create in the world.
Yeah.
And then the persecutor becomes a challenger, and even from the victim role, even if somebody is behaving in a way that might very much seem like a persecutor role, you actually choose to see it as a challenger. And it might be an unconscious challenger, but often in coaching we talk about this, if you're having a conflict with somebody, what's the 1% grain of truth in what they're bringing? So you see these external challenges that might seem like barriers to getting where you want to get in the world as opportunities to learn, as catalysts for action, as teachers, and you shift the orientation from something that's stopping you to something that's teaching you. And then the last part here is the rescuer, who often is the hero, the let's save the day, let me give advice, let me help you get out of the situation. That role shifts from somebody who plays more of a coach to a coach role. So the distinction is in asking supportive questions and offering encouragement. And in the empowerment dynamic, there are no victims. So the rescuer and the persecutor see victim, but the challenger and the coach just see another empowered person who's totally capable of creating what they want to create in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So Praveen, let's share just a few more workplace stories that we, how have we seen these shifts play out effectively in the workplace, and what are some of the keys in your experience?
Yeah, so many examples. So I work quite a bit with mid-level managers, sometimes in really big bureaucratic companies. And often they'll sort of fall into the victim persecutor role, sometimes the rescue role, but let's just start with the victim role. And they'll go, I want to make this change, I want to do this difference in my organization, but we're not getting the funding for it, or senior management is pushing back on this, so I feel powerless and I can't do it, right? So first of all, let's call the person who said this Adam, just as an example. Nothing Adam is saying is untrue. So it's not like when he shares that I'm going to go look at it and go, I know, I disagree. That's not true. It's true. That's what's happening. But just in the language even that Adam's using, the way he's speaking about it, automatically creates a framework of a drama triangle. It cuts short the possibility of what's happening, and it becomes the default reality, even though some of the stuff he's saying actually has facts that are true, right? And so one of the things I would suggest in that place is that's totally true. I agree, got it. But let's take all those facts and reframe it and see what comes up. And it's amazing to watch what happens. So if Adam starts to go, well, they're pushing back and I have some budgetary constraints, but I'm committed to this process. And there are a couple of things I can still do. It might be a smaller scale and I can go ahead and do it. And they'll start to see what the results are. And I'll say, look, to really do this well, it's going to look like this. Can we all agree to it? And here are the results. And here's why I think it's good. Within like a span of 5 minutes, even, it's possible to get out of the drama triangle and reorienting. And what I've seen over and over again in these cases is people's language and how they look at something is critical. Like the moment they start to shift their language and orientation, everything shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation hasn't changed. The external world is exactly identical in this case, in the span of this conversation. And so the first thing I would do is just to start to work with people in shifting their language and their thought patterns. And everything else becomes possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I work a lot with in the social sector, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the tricky things is often I work with people who are literally trying to change big systems. So a classic example is you have the environmental organization, let's say working on climate change, that it's even at an institutional systemic theory of change level, often the drama triangle is the story that is told. There are these corporate players who are motivated by profit, and they're the persecutors, they're the problem. There are people all over the world who are suffering injustice as a result of climate change, and they're the victims. And then there's these organizations who are writing grant proposals to foundations to tell the story of how they're going to be the hero. So there's a sort of institutional level of embeddedness of the drama triangle that's really a challenge to work with, especially for those who work in the social sector. And you see, of course, the same dynamics within, if you work in a big company, for example. It's so easy to say, wow, the system itself is the persecutor. But even in those contexts, and when you look at some of the most effective social movement work in history, everything is a result of a sense of the shift to the creator mindset. All the positive action is what can I and we do to create the change we want to see? How can we orient toward a vision we have in the world? Think Martin Luther King's classic I Have a Dream speech. How different would the civil rights movement have been if he as a leader had just focused on complaining about the problem? He was able to keep his attention on the vision of the world he wanted to create and mobilize action from that place. And again, as Praveen was saying, it's subtle shifts in language that make all the difference here, and focusing on what are the small steps we can take now to move toward that vision. And to that point, I am going to share my screen again one more time here to show one more slide that I think is helpful to understanding part of the challenge in the shift from victim to creator. And you'll see on the screen here this idea of dynamic tension. And so often when working with groups, we'll use this metaphor. This comes from someone named Robert Fritz, who went around studying innovators all over the world and found one of the things they had in common was the way that they related with the emotional discomfort of having a big dream. And so if you look, I have a rubber band in my hand, or you can look at it on the screen. I know my face is small in this part. But you'll see when you have the bottom of the rubber band is current reality, and the top of the rubber band is your vision. And when you stretch to have a really big vision, it creates tension in the rubber band. And when that tension is your own life, that can feel very uncomfortable. So a common response we tend to have is to go into the victim orientation and blame something in the outside world and drop the vision so that there's less tension and it's a little more comfortable. But the invitation here with the empowerment dynamic and shifting to the creator orientation is to maintain a high vision, and instead of feeling the tension as a problem, to see it as actually part of what can catalyze the change you want. So to use that tension as energy to continue to take baby steps toward the vision, and in that way to reduce the tension over time. So this subtle distinction makes all the difference. And if you start interviewing some of the great leaders who have done seemingly impossible things in the world, this capacity to be with this tension and use it as motivation is one of the pieces of common ground that researchers have found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another way I like to look at that too is if you're a musician, let's say you're a guitar player, and you tune your instrument, you want to have, if the strings are too loose, you can't actually make the notes. And so we find over and over again, people, who come from really privileged, entitled backgrounds where everything works, everything is easy, they have nothing to actually, no cause that inspires them. It's like the guitar notes that are too loose. On the flip side, if the guitar notes are too tight, ultimately they can't actually produce the right notes. So if it's too far a dream, it's too much of a stretch, and it's even overleaping reality and not actually meeting reality where it's at, then the notes can't come out too. But staying right in the sweet spot of that tension, that's when the music starts to really happen.
Yeah. So in closing here, again, if we're looking to fix, to blame, or to complain, we're probably in the drama triangle. As Praveen said earlier, if you catch yourself in it, there's nothing wrong with that. It's superhuman. And the invitation is to take a breath and to just choose, where are you putting your attention? What is it you want to be creating in the world? And what's the small action you can take now, even if it's just that moment of recognition, even if it's, I'm going to reach out to that person I'm struggling with and have a direct conversation. If it's, I'm going to do a research task that helps me get clearer on what it is I want to create. Whatever the small action is that you can take so that you feel back in your power, and that you are regarding others as having their power as well, if you tend to catch yourself in the rescuer orientation or in the persecutor orientation. And part of why we put this video together is we feel like this is probably one of the most powerful ways to shift our culture that we're aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a slide with our contact info.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to pull that up, you can share that. So we want to invite you to reach out if anything comes up for you. So one of the things that when we work with people is we're not here to help you bypass whatever's going on and deny your reality. We're going to really help you stay in the experience of what's happening for you, because that's part of the tension. Mm-hmm. And then invite you in the interpretation, which is so much more subjective, to let it go and see what actually serves you in that. So if you have any questions, both about what we shared or in general, any feedback you want to give, here's our contact. Reach out to us.
Yeah, and in closing, I just want to come back to this quote, this Mary Oliver line we started with, and it might be interesting at this point to reflect back on how you responded to that line in the beginning. of our conversation together. And if you might have a different response now after learning about the drama triangle and this AIR, where you put your attention, intention, and what results you want to be creating. So thanks again for your time. Please reach out to us with any questions. I want to again thank those at powerofted.com that we borrowed some of the slides from, and they've got other great resources, training, and a book if you're interested to dive in and learn more. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.